So as we dive right in, I want to make this introduction short, but it's really important, and we're so excited that Holly Sullivan is here with us this morning or this afternoon in Nashville, virtually, of course. Holly is no stranger to so many of you in SEDC, all of you in SEDC, all of the economic development professionals that are joining us today. So I know you all know Holly well. I hope you all know that she's a Nashville native, and she's one of our own. We're so thrilled to claim her as one of our own. She is a University of Tennessee graduate. I'm a Razorback, but I can say go Vols because Holly's on the line. Holly has worked so many projects with so many of you, so I know we're really excited to hear from her. She is the Director of Worldwide Economic Development for Amazon. She, of course, led the HQ2 project, and we were thrilled in Nashville to have the 5,000 announcement for Center of Excellence for Distribution Logistics here in Nashville. So we look forward to hearing from you, Holly. I'm going to turn it over to you, and be sure and think of all your questions as we go into the Q&A. I know she's looking forward to hearing from you. Holly?
Thank you so much, Courtney, and good afternoon. I'm really excited to be here today, but I wish I was there in Nashville. When Jean reached out to me about the conference, I was so excited for several reasons. The chance to see friends in one of my favorite cities, and the theme disruption. I believe we can all speak to disruption over the last several months. Disruption can make us more efficient, smarter, and push us to think big. At Amazon, we do think big. When Amazon was founded in the 90s, I'm not sure that the early team knew Amazon would become a household name. This is the foundation of our Think Big. It's one of our leadership principles. Our customers also think big, and they want choice. Did you know that over 50% of the items sold on our website are small and medium-sized businesses? In Tennessee alone, we have over 28,000 medium and small business sellers and authors growing their business with us. We think about growth and expansion, which, let's be real, that's why you're turning in today, to hear about more growth and expansion. We approach our investment decisions with think big ideas. We analyze the data. We think about what we want to do. We think about what our customers want, and we focus on building relationships and communities. Much has been discussed about the HQ2 process, many calling that process and that approach disruptive. But was it really disruptive? It was just a different way of doing things. We approached the project with a data-driven approach, and we offered communities a choice by issuing the RFP. During the process, we analyzed over 100 data sets. We visited 70 real estate sites in 3 short months and met with countless stakeholders. I believe the latter was something that really helped inform our decision for HQ2 and multiple projects since then. We developed some really strong relationships in multiple communities in a very short amount of time. I'll give you an example. Detroit was not one of the top 20 locations that we chose in January of 2018 now, but we learned a lot about the community, and we developed a really strong relationship with the mayor of Detroit. And now we're pursuing a potential project there, a project that would, quite frankly, reshape a vacant piece of land that was formerly a fairgrounds. What I think is even more interesting is the head of economic development for Detroit, Maureen. She was the head of economic development during HQ2 for Indianapolis, which was in the top 20. So I think it's really important as we think about economic development is to think about the strength of our relationships and knowing that if you're not working with that person today, you may be working with that person a year from now or 5 years from now. We approach our site selection process and investment decisions with a focus on relationships. Few companies have internal economic development teams, but this is intentional for us. And we've grown our economic development team double the size in the last 4 years because we know relationships are important, and we also want to be held accountable. As I said, many believe HQ2 would disrupt the site selection process. Now that it's over, significantly over, we can take a look back and you realize it didn't really disrupt the process, but it did highlight the topic of how companies make site selection decisions, which includes data, includes understanding the communities, the good and the challenging. And there are challenges, particularly with HQ2, of locating such a large corporate headquarters in a community. So how do you address those challenges and work with those communities? You have to do that by earning trust. We think that is so critical to making mutually positive decisions when you invest in a community. Our end result was a great location for a second headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. And through the process of studying locations and meeting with local stakeholders, we realized there was something special about Nashville. The creative talent, the leadership, how Nashville approaches things with a can do or a will do attitude. We hit a recent milestone in Nashville. When I look back at this, and I'm sitting here thinking about this today, here's the timeline of events. We announced HQ2 and the Nashville corporate office in November 2018. We started leasing space in May of 2019 after a very quick tenant build out in 2 different locations. And just last week, we announced we have hired 1,000 people. And next year, we will move into our new office in the Nashville Yards. Some may call our decision to spin off a project from HQ2 in Nashville and already hiring 1,000 people disruptive. I call it thinking big. We are cultivating tech talent in a community that can intersect with the creative talent. As it happens, we'll all be thinking big and disrupt the idea of making little plans. We're going to do some Q&A, but I want to close out with thanking everyone for attending virtually today. I believe during these times, it's important for us to stay connected. It's important for us to disrupt. Jobs and investment are even more top of mind for states and communities right now. We have an active pipeline, and I hope that we can work with you in the future if we're not already working with you today. And I always say we receive quite a few real estate sites, and sometimes people are apologetic about sending those. Please continue to send those sites along. I'm going to kick it over to Courtney. I know she's going to have some questions for me, and I think we're going to take questions from several of you. But I want to start with a question for Courtney first, since this topic is disruption. What was Nashville's reaction to Amazon's decision of building a 5,000 person corporate office?
Big. So speaking of thinking big, our reaction was elation, of course. And then it was also it's almost like we knew that was the result from the beginning. We knew in our hearts that Amazon would find a home in Nashville. We just didn't know what it would look like. And I don't think anybody could have anticipated on our team that worked that project that it would look like it does today. But it couldn't be a more perfect fit. So we were so thankful, and we were really inspired by what Amazon what did, even outside the big picture of HQ2 was big enough. And then to almost pivot towards the end of the process to say this is a good fit for Nashville and make this a significant presence as well was inspiring, and also validified or validated what we thought we could do for Amazon in Nashville. So we're thrilled. We're having a little technical difficulty on the questions, Holly. So
okay.
We're gonna pivot yet again.
All right.
We're working on it. I've got a screen in front of me, but the questions are not quite coming through. Please keep doing that. We're gonna figure this out. We've got very capable people here, because thankfully I've got some questions for you. So I want to read to you. Think big. I think so many of us on this call, or anybody that participated in HQ2, know of Amazon's 14 leadership principles. Think big is one of those. And I just want to read the description of that, because I think it applies so much to the economic development profession, and any advice that you can think of for the EDOs after reading this description, especially during this global pandemic, and how we need to think differently and how we need to think big. So the way Amazon describes it is: thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Leaders create and communicate a bold direction that inspires results. They think differently and look around corners for ways to serve customers. I think this could not be a truer statement for economic development professionals. Anything that you've seen as either an example or any advice to economic development professionals on how to think big in our community right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think it's not only thinking big, but we often prevent ourselves from taking risks because we're scared of failure, or we're scared of creating a one-way door. And when I'm thinking about projects or how to approach projects, and I think HQ2 is a great example of that, but they don't have to be that big. So think on a smaller scale. And if I was on the public side for over 18 years, and I think it's really important for economic developers to not only work and build consensus with their policymakers at the local and state level, but also kind of disrupt how you're thinking about it. The data is so important, and a lot of people talk about these buzzwords. In my time, it was were all for automotive manufacturing. And then it was the tech jobs. There's a lot of different jobs in between there that can be applicable to your community. So don't be afraid to not put your community in one of those, kind of more approved buckets. And don't hesitate to reach out to companies also. I know that oftentimes, I remember sitting on the public side, I'd be a little nervous about making that phone call to a company or sending that email and making sure I got the wording just right. We love hearing from you because no one knows what's going on in your community better than you do. And no one can help us make informed decisions better than you can. And that information is so important. And so while we might not have a project today, you've made that first touch at a relationship, and that might lead to a project in a year or 2 years and 5 years down the road, because companies do build out their plan that far in advance of how they're going to expand. And I just can't hesitate enough of it's okay to take risks and it's okay to fail.
That's great. And kind of along the same line of ways that, a lot of our site visits are now virtual. Are you conducting your projects virtually as Amazon is working from home? What are some advice that you could give for some of us that are in that world right now?
So we're doing both. I am still fairly virtual, but we do have, some of our real estate teams that once we get far enough on a project, they need to see and feel the dirt. But I think the data and the way you can present your site, in a virtual setting is really important. I'll tell you another thing that we've done is, we oftentimes align ourselves with the economic development organizations if we're thinking about a new community. And often before we make an announcement, we'll take the mayor or the economic development team or the Chamber of Commerce into our fulfillment center within, a 50 or 100 mile radius of the proposed project, so they can kind of see what they look like. So we're now doing that virtually. I think it's really important to bring somebody that may not be familiar with your community, bring them to your town virtually and invite us. Red carpet tours are probably not happening right now, or fam tours, as they were called in my day. So think about doing that virtually and showcasing, in a 3-minute video, all the cool things and what makes your community unique.
I've got my glasses on now because we've got some questions on the screens and I need these. Okay, our first question. While HQ2 is a huge project in the US, locating a fulfillment center would be huge in many rural communities. Do you see Amazon seeking sites outside of metro areas for these smaller facilities? And if so, what are you looking for?
Absolutely, I do. When we, we're constantly evolving how we're doing our capacity planning within Amazon and how those locations, we are in most major metro areas now. So now it's time for us to kind of think beyond, the Nashvilles, the Atlantas, the Dallases of the world. And so what other communities, and it's not only about where can we find the talent, it's about where we can service our customers. So I would say as you're thinking about available sites, we have 17 different fulfillment center types right now, from small, medium, to the really large ones. We need sites that are flat, that can hold the weight of the building. A lot of these are heavier buildings because they are now 100 feet high, and they contain robots and multiple mezzanines. So it's a really heavy building that you often kind of don't think about the weight of the building. Parking, and of course we need the labor. Labor is an interesting dynamic right now because there's a lot of opportunity in the labor. There's also a lot of tightness in certain labor markets too. And so we're continuing to think about how can we offer full-time and part-time and flexible employment for those that need more flexibility in their life. And they're high-paying jobs. Our minimum wage in the U.S. is $15 an hour, and you get benefits on day one. We also have our Career Choice program, which offers really career pathways for all of our fulfillment center associates. So there's some real perks with the jobs too. And I would, anybody can reach out to me. I know most of you, but send sites to us.
Great. This question is really about economic impact. I think this is a really this is something that we're always being asked about, and I think we can all do better in this in our profession. So the question from Linda Green: there have been so many published studies about value-added traded sectors and their impact on the economy. Distribution has changed so significantly, and now impacts value add as well. Is there key data that's used by Amazon and others on the economic impact of companies like Amazon for the region?
Yes, but as you mentioned, Linda, even in your question, you sort of answer your question at the same time of asking it. I mean, it is constantly and consistently evolving. The straight ratios aren't really applicable anymore. I think, they're more so in manufacturing than they are in the distribution and logistics space. And I think that has to do with how we approach the employment too. A full-time and a part-time are very different, and then we have flex. We have noted that with our fulfillment centers, we have a significant ripple impact, but it also has to do with our opportunity to for our drivers. So we've created this fleet of drivers around our last mile delivery stations, which work within a system of our larger fulfillment centers. And that also gives a boon to entrepreneurship in communities that may not be thinking about entrepreneurship in that way. So, one program that I think is really interesting is, if you want to become a driver, you can become a driver for Amazon, or we'll give you 10 grand to start your own business and give you all the training and all the how-tos. We have our own internal mapping system also that helps, guide where the trucks need to go. So I'm not directly answering your question, because the straight data is still out there. But I think that when you think about a logistics company, whether it be an Amazon or FedEx or UPS or APL, one of the less known companies, you have the straight jobs, but they also tend to bring in the other companies and other opportunities. What I have found with Amazon, even before I started working at Amazon, and I helped locate BNA 3, which is in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I knew if I could just land Amazon, I would get other companies to follow, because everybody knows Amazon takes site selection very seriously. We take where we locate and how we do the process very seriously. And the 2 years following that announcement were some of the highest job growth in Rutherford County.
Now, you'll never be finished answering HQ2 questions. So
never in my life.
Never in your life. So I know you're ready for that. So this is a good one. Knowing how what you know now. So not that you could predict what we're dealing with right now, but what would you change about the HQ2 search and process, if anything?
The basic process, I don't think I would change anything. I thought it was an interesting approach, and we took a lot of some fair amount of criticism, to be transparent, on the process. But that was a very intentional decision for us as a company. And I remember, talking about with our leadership of, there's several ways we can do this, a more traditional way where we choose and we just narrow it down. But we really wanted to locate in a community that wanted us also. And so I also don't believe that it could have ever been confidential throughout the process. So we were very intentional in the way we did it. The one thing that I would say, and while it was a lengthy process timeline anyway, I think we could have taken a few more months, just the site visits portion of it. We did all 20 locations in about 2.5 months. And so seeing that many real estate sites and that many different locations was a lot. It was very taxing on our brains. And I remember waking up in hotel rooms like, where am I today? And that confusion of which way is the bathroom? At the same time, I don't think it would have changed our decision, but it would have made the process a little less taxing, I think, on us. But from the public standpoint and from a local economic development standpoint, I don't think we should have lengthened the process. That would have been more of a selfish decision for our brain. And get a little rest in between. But, it did take a long time. But I think that is also important in how HQ2 has, if nothing else, I think that every economic developer can point to that project and explain to their board that might be pressuring them to get projects down the road that these things take time, and they take time for a reason. And so we need to give companies that time and give site selection consultants that time to dive into the data, to understand the challenges and understand the opportunities of locating in a specific location.
Great. Okay, so we'll fast forward to the future a little bit. What's the best way for any community to submit possible real estate sites to Amazon? Directly to you?
Directly to me, or I hope that you've met someone on my team. I have about 12 or 15 different project managers now scattered across the country. And if, my email is hollyss@Amazon. So send it to me and I can connect you with our project managers. But don't send all your sites to me today because I won't have time to check that many emails.
Everybody be kind.
Be kind.
And make sure they're sites that would make sense. We all know ED 101 is make sure your site would make sense for Amazon.
And entitled. We prefer entitled sites. I mean, I think that's a good point, actually. I mean, our process is very fast, particularly on the fulfillment center side of things. And we're always working backwards from peak season. So right now we're, rushing to get equipment in, employees hired, and sites to launch before peak this year. Of course, with COVID-19, we're in peak 12 months out of this year, and suspect that will continue into the following year also. But, entitled sites that, we're fine doing some infrastructure or partnering with the community on infrastructure also.
Has Amazon had interest in inland river ports, especially Kentucky, from Bob Helton?
Bob, not so much on inland river. We do obviously use several ports in North America, but not as much in inland river. We see a few more risk with that, but happy to talk about it further at the same time.
Bob, you've got her email address, so be sure and reach out directly. Okay, so we have a few more minutes. We have a few more questions that are being typed now. I have one more question about, the theme of the conference is obviously disruption, thinking big if you're Amazon. What can you tell us? Recently, Scout launched in Franklin, down in Williamson County, just out in our Nashville region. And I know there's a lot of buzz about sites in the mall and that additional light last mile delivery. Has that all been sped up because of the pandemic, or is that is that just the next trend in distribution logistics and delivery to customer?
On the Scout, that's been in our plan for a while. And for those not familiar with Scout, it's a personal delivery device. It's about the size of an igloo cooler. Not if you're Bob Biff, but a smaller igloo cooler going to the beach. And the intent is that it works in more suburban locations, not as much urban locations, with higher density residential suburban locations where there's wider sidewalks, and it can deliver 4 to 5 packages, smaller packages. Currently, we've launched in Franklin, Tennessee, and Atlanta, Georgia, and in Washington State and California, one side. We still have ambassadors with them, but the idea is that we can launch the personal delivery devices so it cuts down on some of the van traffic and truck traffic in some of these more suburban neighborhoods. And, Scout can do its thing and then go back and get it charged. So it's also a reduction of our carbon footprint, which we think is very important and also a priority for the company. Now, onto the kind of think about mall sites. We've done several redevelopments for larger FCs, previous strip centers, and so this is sort of a natural evolution as we look at what's the next generation of a mall look like, or there are going to be malls. And we've all had the working with developers for the more lifestyle outdoor malls, and so we look at this as an opportunity, and we'll see how it goes. I will say that for peak, we're also thinking about some more unique ideas of convention centers and certain stadiums maybe not being used. Can that be a short-term option for us in our more dense areas where we have higher customer density to get product from point A to point B?
I swear this is a real question in the chat. Or what is the picture behind you? And it's not from me or anyone on my team. So what's the picture?
It's the Ryman Auditorium.
Of course it is.
It is a little touch of Nashville.
I love it. I need that picture. I don't know if any of you tuned into CBS this morning. I watched that religiously on Sunday, and they did a story about the Ryman and just kind of some of the live stream events that will take place there. So a little shameless plug about the Ryman in Nashville as well. And Bob got a good chuckle on your cooler comment. He's my only audience member right now. So thanks for bringing him alive in this.
Absolutely.
Okay. What else have we not covered, Holly? We've reached the end of our questions. Bob, you have a question? No, Bob doesn't have any questions for you. Will, do you have any questions? Will's mic'd up. All right, I've got one more question for you. Jean's over here in mine. You can't see any of these. So tell me, as economic developers are, thinking about what happens and depending on how long this pandemic stretches on, and some of us are returning to the office and some are not. I know Amazon's not. What can we do? I know we talked about this in the beginning, but what tools can we fine tune during this time? And I know here in Nashville, our pipeline has started to fill back in and we're starting to see a lot more activity, but is there one thing that you would hope that, that we would be able to provide to you as we have some time on our hands?
I really think, and this is a really difficult time, and I think it's a really hard time for economic developers to stay connected. It's such a close-knit community, particularly in the Southeast. Everybody talks to each other. You attend conferences. You're inevitably working similar projects, so you can kind of share some of the. Nobody says the company name, but you're like, oh, I got that RFP, on Madison, Project Madison. So first of all, I would encourage you all to stay connected to each other. Maybe even, through an SEDC or some of your state organizations, continue to have a 30 minutes or 45 minute every month or so, or every other month, opportunities where you can come and you can convene and share those stories. I would also say that it would be a very good investment to continue investing in your website and your data. I remember the days of the fabulous Mark James and his presentations of always making sure that your website, we would, you'd hire him to analyze it and you would find out that, gosh, I thought it was so good and it wasn't good. But making sure your website is interactive but also telling the story that you can't necessarily tell through data. And that local knowledge is so important right now. And there is, there's a lot of divisiveness in the States right now. And anything you can tell that's unique about your community coming together, or how your community is handling diversity and inclusion, how your community is handling, the policing of the community and policies, I think those are hard conversations, but I would encourage you not to steer away from the more difficult conversations, because companies read the headlines. So we know what's going on in most of the major metro areas, but we only see it through the eyes of the media. And I think there's probably oftentimes what reality is different than what we're seeing, in the eyes of the media. So tell your story. Don't be afraid to have the more difficult conversations, and be transparent with your local policymakers, but be transparent with your companies too, if there are challenges in the community. Oftentimes we can come to the table and offer a solution or offer a partnership that may change the narrative of what is actually happening on the ground.
Great. And we have time for one quick question, which is probably not a quick question to answer. As we all interact daily with real estate professionals and developers, and Amazon's a huge tenant of office space, soon to be here, or already here with 1,000 and in Seattle and in DC area. And as Amazon is a huge landlord and a huge owner of real estate, do you anticipate all the conversation? Do you anticipate Amazon doing a lot more virtual work, or how does that change the culture? I know a lot of real estate developers are getting nervous about how we return and what it looks like, and what our built environment is going to look like. Anything you can share on Amazon's standpoint?
Sure. So we are work from home until January. I think that brings up a really interesting dynamic. We don't have all those questions answered yet. Of course, we're looking at things as every company is, but we also think it's really important that there's a culture. And that's something that I love about working at Amazon is there is such a culture, and you can't get that really working virtually. I mean, I was fortunate to be in the office, but I've hired a few new people, and it's hard to connect that culture on a virtual setting. So as a company, I think that we've proven that some employees prefer having options, and we will continue to give employees options, but we will also continue to lease office space. So we're very excited about Arlington headquarters, and we have recently presented a high-level presentation to the county board there with our new iconic structure. And then we plan to move in our first 500,000 square feet in Nashville. However, so we're still moving ahead, but I also think that we may take a pause on some of our longer term developments that really nobody ever knew about. It's just we're always thinking 10 and 15 years ahead of time, and you can't create office space out of thin air. But we're not pulling back either. So I think that other companies will have more difficult decisions, but at the end of the day, employees want a choice. And I think it's prudent on companies to give employees that choice. And, you know, I'm literally here quarantined in my room, and my 5.5-year-old is on the other side of these doors. I'm hoping for the best, which so far so good. And so there are challenges with working from home too, and there's stresses to that. So I think it's important that for a company not only focus on the physical real estate, but also the mental health of their employees. And having that choice is sometimes, whether it's with COVID or without a COVID situation, very important for companies to take that into account to make sure that the physical health with the mental health of their teams are working out for the best.
You're exactly right. And you know your audience, talking to economic developers who are extroverts for the most part. We're ready to get back and be with our team. So thank you, Holly, so much. I know we all enjoyed hearing from you and seeing you again. And thank you for joining us. Any final goodbye?
Yes, thank you so much. This is, again, I wish I could see everyone and hug your necks, and but I think it's really important for us all to stay connected. So, you know, do reach out, and if I can offer anybody, you know, advice or some information on our process, I'm happy to do so. And also remember to take care of yourselves. There's a lot of pressure on economic developers right now to continue with job creation and bring investments and the announcements. But be patient and be kind to yourself. And there are silver linings in this process. And so be sure to look for those within your community and within yourself. Thank you all very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Holly.